Welcome to the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul Delegro, your host today, and my guest is Dave Harris. He's a technology business executive with a long resume in technology. So happy to have him on the show. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, the subject for today is something that's near and dear to both our hearts, I think, and it's about. You've been on the customer side most of your life. I've been on the vendor side most of my life. And that's a tricky paradigm at times, right? That whole relationship and how to mutually benefit from that relationship. And so I know you've got some strong opinions on how those things work. And I certainly do too. So it'd be nice to kind of start sharing ideas and seeing if we can come up with a solution to solve every problem in the world.
It would be, Paul. I mean, I think the problem that we run into all too often is it's adversarial instead of a partnership. You're trying to get as much money out of me as possible, and I'm trying to save as much. And we don't work towards the solution as much as we're, going back and forth over how much is this going to cost me, and when do I achieve my ROI?
Yeah.
I think you've seen it in the past that. Too often, somebody's out buying something, they think of it as a commodity, and it's really, a cornerstone to what they're doing with their future. And as a result, all the pieces to make it mutually beneficial don't come together when the deal is completed.
Yeah, great point, by the way. I mean, it's one thing if you're selling a commodity, right? Like a laptop or something, a printer or something. But when you're selling solutions, you have to be on the same team, because if it's an adversarial position, and I've had customers like this, they hate vendors, they think we're the enemy, and they think our sole mission in life is to take their money.
Yeah. I mean, think about buying, Microsoft SQL even. Microsoft SQL looks like a commodity in the buying process,
right?
Because you're just buying licenses for databases. But really the solution around why are you buying those licenses? What are you going to use them for? How are you going to use them? Really plays into making that a mutually beneficial deal.
Yeah.
Too often customers and vendors apart, they just sit and say, Dave says he needs that. Here, I'll write the order. Dave gets that. Then Dave's not happy.
Yeah. So to me, obviously being on the vendor side all these years, you've got to add value somehow, right? Like I've always said to customers, if you need a quote from me, you don't really need you can go to anyone for that. Like, what am I really doing that's special if you just ask me for a quote? So when we have customers do that on occasion, say, I need a quote on something, we try to say, hey, we want to be as respectful as we can, but we say, hey, let's take a step back. What's the goal here? What problem are you trying to solve? Maybe this is the solution. Maybe it's not. And how can we help? And that's when our technical guys take over at that point.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the key to the conversation is too often senior leaders are trying to do budget things. And it's, Paul, go get me a quote for how much more you're going to need in Microsoft licensing for next year, or how much more of this or how much more of that. And it's, the conversation starts at, I need a quote to get some budgetary stuff done. Now we've got the budgetary stuff done, but we haven't accounted for all the things that go with it. And as a result, we may have quoted the wrong thing.
Right.
And as a leader, I'm putting that out to the CFO or to the board, whoever I need to go get the money from. And then when we come back to start the project, it's like, oh, SQL wasn't the answer. We need Databricks.
Right.
We didn't talk about the right thing, and now we're millions of dollars off on starting this project to get the ROI. Those are common themes that we as leaders have to teach our people to listen when somebody asks, "What are you going to use this for?" Give them the answer.
Yeah.
That you might want to be less than completely transparent sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're doing, or it's something confidential the company's doing. But the more you can tell your vendor and your VAR, the better off you're going to be on getting to the right solution.
Yeah, because I mean, the nature of the beast is the more eyes you have on something, the more educated, the more equipped you will be.
Right.
Um,
Well,
so
and I think it goes to, having spent time on the vendor side, knowing your customer too.
yeah,
Sometimes you're going to have a customer that comes to you looking for something because they think they need the latest, greatest thing in the world. And you know that they don't have the capability to implement that.
got it.
It's a disservice to sell it to them without having the conversation of how are you going to get this implemented?
Yeah.
How are you actually going to achieve what you want to achieve with this?
Yeah, and if you don't have the technology chops in your staff to manage that solution, that's the other part. But yeah, we can it can be implemented, but who's gonna take care of it?
Right.
Who's gonna monitor it? Right?
Well, who's gonna take care of it? Who's going to do the maintenance? And you know, we've seen it with technologies in the past that, you know, we can go back to the old days and think about Visual Basic, which it was the panacea back in the old days,
Yeah.
and it had a lifespan. And then .NET took over. And then you had to retool into .NET because Visual Basic wasn't going to get you there anymore. Some of these technologies that are coming out today, we don't know what that bathtub looks like to be
Yeah.
able to predict how long is this thing really going to be around, and what's our exit strategy around it. That's what we have to depend on our partners to kind of give us insight to what's going on other places.
Yeah, so that's a great point. We say that to our customers all the time. Look, we're not the end all be all. We certainly have our strengths, but the one advantage we do have is we have hundreds and hundreds of customers that we work with on a daily basis. So we can look at all these other customers and say, okay, what's working, what's not, versus not that you don't know your business, but you've got one environment you're looking at, right?
Hmm.
And so the value of someone like us, so I feel like this is a commercial for me right now, but is we have a lot of we have a lot of experience behind it, a lot of experienced technical folks that can counsel and add some give some great advice to our customers, and so that's the value of what we do. And to your point is include these people and say, hey, what's everyone else doing?
Right. Well, and I think that's where the VAR and resellers come into the market, because when you're working with Microsoft, they're going to talk to you about Microsoft stuff. And if you're working with Oracle, they're going to talk to you about Oracle stuff. Dell is
Yeah,
Dell stuff.
yeah. Cisco,
And
the HPE, they've got
right,
they've got one set of products, and that's all they're going to try to sell you.
right. And, if Synapse isn't the thing that's really going to fix my problem, is Microsoft going to be the one that can actually tell me it's not going to fix my problem? Or is it going to be my value added reseller that actually can actually say, you know, we have, customers that they had to use Databricks, they had to use Snowflake. Synapse wasn't going to do it for them.
Sure,
And these were the use cases to get onto the table for us to say, I was thinking about A, B, C, and D. We hadn't gotten to E, F, G, and H for me to say, oh, I can only get through my first five things and then I'm going to have to change.
right.
Yeah, Paul, that's happened in the past to me where, we moved from SQL to Synapse, and, costs rocketed, and we couldn't get the performance we needed and had to leave the Microsoft stack to find an actual solution for it,
Yeah,
in order to serve our customers.
yeah, and so that's it. You touched on it, a little earlier about the ROI of these things, right? I mean, uh,
Yeah,
you invest a lot of money in these solutions, and if you don't get your ROI and you have to go in other directions, that's painful.
yeah, it is. And I think that's where the partnership with the VARs really comes in,
Yep,
because, you know, I would expect my reseller, Paul, to ask me, we may be at the end of the fourth quarter, it's time to make the numbers and all that kind of stuff. But, while you're pushing me for my signature, you should also be pushing me. So how fast do you think you can get this implemented? I've been
yeah,
places that we've made software purchases, thought we had a plan to put it together. The world changed just slightly after
sure,
we bought things. We had to delay for a week. Now we can't get the implementation team that we thought we had contracted to put on site in an adequate amount of time. And then it sits there and isn't implemented before the first renewal.
Yeah, no, and we've seen that, by the way. So that brings me to my next point, Dave, is what about outsourcing those types of things?
Well, outsourcing and insourcing together is, I think, the solution to that.
Yeah.
That you have to have a team on the ground that knows what the outcome looks like when it's right. And that team needs to be involved with selecting the outsourcer, who's your integration partner, and those people need to be at the table when we're having the conversation about the purchase of the assets to enable that program. Because, if I'm working with an integrator, with my VAR, with my internal team, so everybody has a place at the table to say, hey, this might not be successful. Should we pause and make sure we know what we need to do so that we can all be successful? Or to sign off and say, yeah, we've got a plan. We know what we're going to do. We may not know how we're going to get it done exactly, but we know what we're going to do to get there and can put a total cost of ownership together and kind of put a stake in the ground for where we expect to start recognizing ROI on what we're doing. Uh, you know, if you've ever had to wait for somebody to go to the board to ask for money for a project, you know, I love agile development as a software engineer. I think it's probably the best game in town using Scrumban.
Sure.
But when you have to go ask for the money, the board doesn't ask how much you need. Okay, when do I? And they care about what am I going to get? When am I going to get it? And how much money is it going to make me? And
Yeah,
if you
right.
can't answer those questions, they don't fund it.
Yeah,
So,
everyone has a different perspective, right? You're looking at it, not you personally, but a lot of folks in your chair look at it from a technology standpoint. But you got to put yourselves in their shoes and say it's strictly ROI to these guys. They're going to
mhm.
give you money. What's the return on that? How is it going to benefit the business? And what's my return?
Well, and it needs to be a business decision. As a technologist, if you're buying something because it's the latest greatest technology and you don't know what you're going to use it for, but you know you need one of those, you probably don't need it.
Right.
And that's how you own every flavor of messaging server or every flavor of database or insert technology here. And because you bought it because it looked great and then it didn't get used and you never achieved the value with it.
Yeah. You know what we see a lot, Dave, and I'd like your opinion on this. We see a lot of people, a lot of customers that just continually put band-aids on things. And it's so frustrating for us. Like as a vendor, they think this one solution, we're speaking in generalities here, obviously.
Mhm.
We think this one solution is going to cure the problem. And it may a little bit, but then it causes downstream problems or upstream problems. And it's been so frustrating sometimes for us to get the customer to think, let's back up a little bit. Let's look at this agnostically and globally, and let's start cleaning up this environment and doing that. So, what have you seen? Have you been around a while? And I don't mean that you're old, Dave. I didn't say that. But your experience, we'll leave it at that. What's your take on that aspect of it, Dave?
So in my experience, every solution has a lifespan,
Sure.
and through enhancement, bug fixes, things like that, eventually solutions have to be rewritten. It's not a matter of porting it to a new platform, upgrading it. It's time to rewrite it. And a lot of companies, if it's working, don't fix it.
Right.
And so you run into that problem of, we heard it on the news, well, at least the jokes
Right.
that, Southwest didn't go down during the latest outage because they still had stuff running on Windows 3.1. Well, CloudStrike couldn't get them.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but
That's
but
funny. That's
there's
funny.
but there's some truth in you don't maintain things that are just doing what they're supposed to do until the upgrade breaks it. And then you try to band-aid your way through the upgrade that you're forced to do because of a SOC 2 audit or something like that. If you don't step back and understand lifespan of your system and where your tech debt is coming from in the holistic system, then you're bound to keep just, fixing one part of the car and breaking five more. It's the analogy I use is you could put a turbocharger on any engine, but can the internals actually handle it?
Sure. Yeah.
And if you don't, there's certain engines you can do great things with, but if you don't upgrade the internals first, the turbocharger is just going to give you a bone ache.
Yeah.
And companies just those are hard investments to make because imagine your SAP implementation has kind of run its course, or your Salesforce implementation has run its course, and now it's time to do it again. Yeah, those are huge programs.
Right.
And, I was at a company that the actual answer from Salesforce was, how do we make this Salesforce better? You start over. And the answer turned out not to be Salesforce when they decided it was time to start over. But you've got to be able to take that hard look and say, do I have the things for the next 20 years?
Yeah. Tough call though. Like you said, I always felt like making changes in any organization is the toughest part because it's a lot of gnashing of teeth, a lot of hours, a lot of legwork on the front end and on the back end. But ultimately, it's a business decision, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you think about it, Paul, you know, a lot of the Six Sigma stuff that we learned in the past, the the project management, program management, change management parts of Six Sigma, really what really made Six Sigma work at the time that it was brought out was organizational change management and making Paul feel better about the fact that we're going to move the cheese
Yeah.
and you're going to have to do something different. Because too often I've seen companies that they buy a system, a COTS system, and now they want to customize it to how they do business, even though that's not how the system was set up to work. I worked at a software company back early in my career that we built telco software,
Sure.
and we signed GTE, and that was a great thing. And the amount of customization for GTE finally caused the branch that you couldn't port back and forth enhancements between the two branches of the GTE version of the software and the rest of the world. You don't want to be that guy because then you can't get the upgrades.
Yeah. Unreal. So now you mentioned something little early about like making Paulie feel good. That's a whole nother dynamic of this is the human element, right? You've got
Mhm.
your team, and it's a delicate balance of, as a leader, you want to make good decisions, but how do you include the staff in the decision-making process to make them feel like they're part of the process and feel good about themselves?
So my view has always been that if you're going to have to use it, you need to have a seat at the table while we're talking about why we're going to bring it on. And, as a leader, leading a large infrastructure organization or a large software engineering organization, you're going to have hundreds of products inside your building, inside your data
Yep.
center that you have to keep track of all the contracts and things like that. Well, if Paul has a stake in making the decision for what he's going to be responsible for implementing, what he's going to be responsible for maintaining, understanding, training his staff, he needs a seat at that table. And you need to be supporting Paul through the process of getting it ready for the contract, as opposed to getting all the contracts together and saying, okay, Paul, and here's your thing to go implement now.
Yeah. No.
Paul's going to be vested if he has that relationship with the vendor and doesn't have to call me to call the vendor every time something needs to get done.
Correct.
And that way we can get 100 deals done a year, as opposed to, me as a leader, I maybe do 10 to 15 big ones a year,
Sure.
just because of the time with the lawyers.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't.
We won't bring the lawyers too much
Yeah,
into
we'll
this.
leave the lawyers out. They're made fun of enough, so we'll leave them out. Well, hey, I'll take that back. I'm a sales guy. Sales guys are always being made fun of too. So, maybe not as much as lawyers, but
Well, yeah, as long as you deliver lunch, we tolerate you. I don't know that a
there you
lawyer
go.
could bring lunch and we tolerate them.
Yeah. Well, I always say I'm a relationship manager, Dave. Like I let the smart guys do their business, and I say, hey, where are we going to lunch today?
Yeah, well, fat, dumb, and happy, and sometimes they'll sign the paperwork.
There you go. There you go. So another thing, as a leader, we all take risks in life. So at what point, like as a leader, how do you assess risk? I guess let me back. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So when you're looking at a project, how do you assess it?
So, there's always a people risk with every project.
Sure.
There's the technology risk of do the people know the technology, and is the technology sound enough for what we're about to do with it? Is there financial risk to the company around, what happens if this fails? You know, Look at the worst case scenario. I use the example of Teams. When we started in the pandemic, you
Right.
know, I had an on-site Skype infrastructure that was sitting in the office building, not in a data center with Skype for Business, and it was sized for about 500 people to be on it at any given time, and then we sent 5,000 people home.
Uh,
you know, all of a sudden Skype is falling over on Monday morning as people try to get in just to make phone calls. And, you know, I had to go to my boss and say, well, we've been looking at Teams. We have an answer, but we don't know what all the check boxes mean. But we know that people will figure out a way to get their job done. So within a few days, we rolled out Teams. And then we started figuring out how to check the boxes.
right.
The risk we were trying to overcome there came to fruition, though. People found a way, and they went and got their own Zoom accounts, signing up. They went to Slack, they went to wherever they could find video conferencing. And then the bills started coming in going, you've exceeded the number of corporate users on
Yeah.
this. And it could have been millions of dollars had we not gotten Teams out and started having the conversations. But,
Yeah.
that rollout was tough because it was, little lunch and learns every day for 5,000 people to dial in at their leisure to learn little bits as we learn more about Teams, rolling it out to an organization of 5,000 people. But we knew the financial risks of
Sure.
people because we had healthcare data. You know, Paul goes out, gets Zoom, records a meeting on Zoom. It ends up in Zoom Cloud, and it had PII information from healthcare and HIPAA protected information in it, and we get big fines. You
Yeah.
know, that's an example of, I'll take a big technical risk that might fail to protect a big business risk. If there's not a big business risk, if we're not going to lose huge market share, then we need to be more measured. So it's really a combination of the people, the business, the technology, the capability, and, then kind of getting that gut instinct on what do you think your team can get away with based upon their capabilities.
Yeah. No, you just kind of reminded me of something about the whole Teams conversation about. I think the pandemic helped all those video conferencing platforms like Zoom and Teams and WebEx and, like you said, Slack, all these different platforms out there. And I'll tell you what's helped it. Like now I'm on more Zoom, video calls. What call it? We use Teams internally, so we do a
Mm.
lot of video calls with that. And it's commonplace now, as opposed to, I think before the pandemic, it was not. It was starting to gain a little traction, but boy, it's really since the pandemic, it's like standard procedure now.
Well, and the interesting thing, Paul, that I saw come through the pandemic with as we all went home, is, I worked in a hybrid organization at the time that we left that about half my people were not based out of my office. A large portion of my infrastructure team were actually work from home remote already.
Okay.
And, but the dynamic was very much the mothership office was where decisions were made. And if you weren't in the office, that was kind of hard on your career
Yes.
because you weren't seen, you know, people didn't know what Joe looked like or what Lisa looked like. And so it really leveled the playing field for people working in geographically diverse teams to everybody be stuck with the same technology for a while
Yeah.
and build those relationships because you got to know people better having to interact like this than the five people you pass at the water cooler every day.
Yeah. No doubt. I think you touched on a great point about having your face in the office. I tell my kids this. I mean, I know some of them work in hybrid environments, and I said, don't be the person that never shows up to the office because you're going to be the first one to get let go.
I don't think that's as much an issue in this brave new world we're in as much as it is don't be the person nobody's sure what they're doing.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with this. Is and my daughter told me that at her company they had layoffs and they laid off some people that no one had ever seen. Like
Mhm.
no one even really knew what they were doing. And so that's a great point on your
Well, I
part.
mean, the layoff process, especially in larger companies, um, you know, having been through it myself in the past, sometimes the process of decision making is removed from the people who know because they're
Yeah,
impacted in the process.
yeah,
And as a result, it's a committee of HR people and, leaders that may not even know the product that they're being asked to trim the team about
yeah,
um, because it's going to be in their new purview and they only have 5 slots and they've got 10 people.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the plus side of going to the office, though, for a lot of folks is, again, the networking because,
Yes,
you know, you're not going to be in meetings with people from other organizations on a regular basis that you might pass in the hallway and just meet and find some common interest to all of a sudden, now I know the guy in finance and now I know the
yeah.
guy in legal. Now I know this person in HR. Now I know these consulting folks.
No, I completely agree. I mean, guys like us, we grew up in the office culture. So that was
Mhm.
it. You were in when you weren't out on the road and me being outside says you were expected to be in the office. And I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed the office culture. Like you said, water cooler talk, walking by someone in financing, poking your head in. Just it's a
Mhm.
social thing too. Uh, I'm a
Yeah,
little
I mean,
older now, so I don't mind being by myself a little bit more. But when I was younger, I don't know if I could have done it, the
yeah,
remote
well, I
stuff.
started out, where it was 5 days on the road and, I was working for a software company as a consultant, always out at the client site writing
Yep.
code. And I'd stop by on Friday afternoons at the office or Friday evenings, depending on when my flight got in, to drop off expense reports that had to be hand signed with the real receipts back then.
Back in the day,
And,
I know.
and run into people in the office. But, if I didn't run into those people, I could have spent my entire time at that company and nobody knew who I was, what I looked like, or I
Yeah.
was just an email address.
All right. So.
You know, I mean, so Paul, what are you seeing that as leaders we could do better for our vendors?
Yeah, I think transparency is the one that I really, and we have some great customers that the relationship is such a trusting relationship. I think that's the good stuff. But when you have customers that really try to keep everything close to the vest and don't trust anybody, I don't see that ever working, Dave. I
Hmm.
just wish there, if it ain't us, it's got to be someone else then. Because if you can't trust us to be a partner, then maybe we're not the right partner. But you've got to me, You've got to be a team, and there's got to be open lines of communication at all times. That's the one thing I see. Now, grant most of our customers are pretty good. We have a few that it's a struggle. I'll just say that.
Well, I think it's always a struggle as you're building the relationship,
Yes.
and how you get the wins to build on that relationship is the key. You know, I've had great relationships with vendors where, you know, we did all the due diligence, that, you know, we made decisions like, we're not going to buy it. Let's not buy it this year. Let's wait 6 months because it's the right thing for you as my customer. I've had vendors tell me that, you
Yeah.
know, even on very large scale deals where they knew, you know, their boss was going to be upset when they said they're not ready to buy yet. And it's, yeah, they can write the check, but they can't do anything with the software when they buy it.
Yeah.
You know, but being able to have a customer that trusts you enough to take that advice too.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
you know, that comes from, how do you get to the fact that we're going to put a deal together? You know, the other thing that is hard, and you and I have talked about this before, is sometimes the deal is driven by the actual manufacturer.
Yes. Very much so.
And
We see that a lot.
so, you know, you know, Microsoft EA is, you know, kind of the primary example of, you spend all the time with the Microsoft folks, and then some reseller just writes paper.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to get a value added sell out of that deal.
Correct.
But, you know, if I'm buying something like Tibco EBX and working with the Tibco folks, you know, that's where, as the reseller, they bring to the table, I'd hope you bring either you're the integrator that can work with me, or you have an integrator that's done EBX that you've worked with, so that we can have those people at the table too. Because, you know, the Tibco guy, he needs to get software sold, and we need you as, you know, our ally in some ways against Tibco, to have that conversation to say, can I actually achieve what Tibco tells me I can achieve with this? And I know that that's a hard place for a vendor, value added reseller, to sit with the manufacturer between like that, and saying, yeah, I think they're over promising what EBX can do. But, you know, sometimes it's couching in, yeah, EBX can do that, but I'm not sure you can do it with that,
Right.
with the state you're in right now.
Yeah, so that's a great point, Dave. Sometimes we have to have that delicate balance of, we've got our, the manufacturers, the OEMs, and the customer. We're sitting in the middle, and we're trying to make everyone happy sometimes, right? But sometimes you got to be brutally honest with the OEMs and say, A, that they're not ready, the timing's not right. You got to be just blunt with them. But again, from their standpoint, they've got numbers to hit, and their bosses are trying to put pressure on them. Why can't you get that PO? And so it's a delicate balance. But again, it comes down to that trust factor. If you have a good relationship with the manufacturer, you can just have an open conversation. Say, look, I'm going to have to be dead straight with you on this one. It's not the time.
Right.
This
Well,
isn't the whatever it might be.
and I think that's the thing that, you know, more of the people on the purchasing side need to be willing to ask the question. I think I need this. Do you think I need this?
Yeah.
And okay, we agree I need it. Do you think I'm ready for it?
Yeah.
And if we think I'm ready, do I have a plan to actually do something with it? Or is it going to sit around for 6 months while I figure out what I'm going to do with it? You know, I mean,
Yep.
I've seen executives make the decision, we're going to get the buy-in because I need to spend this year's budget money, without the plan to get it implemented. And then you can't implement it. You know, during the
Yeah.
supply chain problem, you know, a person bought a whole bunch of, you know, new wireless devices, going to rewire their building. Well, that's a great purchase, except Cisco couldn't deliver it for
Yeah.
almost 14
6
months.
months. Yeah. It was
Well,
insane.
they didn't get it
Yeah.
until, not the next year, but the next year. They showed up the next February from a
Yeah.
December buy.
No, I hear
You
you.
know,
We saw it.
yeah.
You're
I
you're
mean,
you're spot on on that one.
well, and there are sometimes that manufacturers, through no fault of their own, aren't going to be able to deliver what they thought they could. That's okay in certain things, but
Yeah,
if you're talking a software implementation program, you know, you're buying, an ERP system, an HR system, stuff like that. You need to have worked through the plan with your integrator of what are the milestones to getting things done. Because sometimes that milestone of we need to have the software licenses isn't at the beginning of the project.
yeah, I gotcha. Well, Dave, I think we have solved all the world's problems today, at least in the
At least we've
vendor.
told them that they have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. So, but this was good. I really enjoyed this conversation. Again, this is something that, you and I live every day, right? This is what we do.
Mhm.
All these relationships and how to manage them. And, we all make mistakes, but you try to do the right thing by the customers and um, go from there. So, well, Dave, if anyone would want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
So they can hit me up at Dave.Harris at DaveHarrisENT.com,
Okay.
or find me on LinkedIn through my name's Dave Harris, and Dave Harris ENT is my handle on LinkedIn.
Very nice. Well, Dave, thanks again for being on the show. Really appreciate this. Was fun. Again, this was something, it's funny when I have guests on. Sometimes they have subject matters I don't know much about, but this
Mm.
happens to be one that I'm intimate with. So this was a fun one for me.
Yeah, it was fun for me too. The our ability to teach the people coming up behind us
Sure.
from our mistakes,
Yep.
because I've made bad buys in the past, and that's how I know how not to buy software, how not to buy hardware. And I'd rather they learn from my mistakes and learn from other mistakes that I've seen than make those mistakes themselves and lose a whole bunch of money.
Sounds good. Well, we'll end on that note, Dave. Again, thanks for being on the show. And that's a wrap for another edition of the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast.
Thanks, Paul.
Paul Delegro signing off until next time.